Hi everybody, my name is Camille Fox and today I'm going to talk to you about my personal model of communication. Communication. What is it really? As human beings, we communicate all the time. But did you know that there's a science behind the way we communicate with one another? That's why people who study communication have built models of communication. There's many different models of communication, and you're about to learn about my own personal model. I think that my model of communication is significant because I think that sometimes communication can happen completely unplanned, unintentionally, and without any form of verbal or nonverbal messages being sent. I'll go into more detail later. So, are you ready to learn the details of my model of communication? In my opinion, communication has to involve at least two entities. I say entities because, well, I think that when we think about communication, we normally think about human-on-human communication. But humans can communicate with animals, animals can communicate with each other, and there's so many different living things in this world that communicate. So we'll just call them entities. But just to make things easier, we can think of them as human beings. Communication begins when one entity sends a message to another entity. Usually this is purposeful. For now, we'll assume that the message is purposeful. Messages can be verbal or nonverbal. And you may be thinking, what are some examples of nonverbal communication? Well, facial expressions, such as, are forms of communication. Even though I didn't use any words, you may have realized that I was making a face signifying confusion or suspicion. Also, another nonverbal type of communication is writing. We all know that, and we do it all the time with texting, emailing, and stuff like that. Messages are sent between entities by a number of communication mediums. So, like I said a minute ago, sometimes we communicate via text. So that mobile service provider would be a medium, or maybe a computer is a medium. When we're talking, it's just the air is the medium, and our voices are being projected to each other physically. Once the message is received and comprehended by the second entity, and once the entity responds, communication flows freely between the two, as long as both parties continue the process. It's very important that the person receiving the message understands the message, because if not, communication is not taking place. The communication process is disrupted if one entity fails to correctly interpret the other person's message. Communication will also fail if there's a disturbance in the medium. For instance, if I was communicating with someone else in this room and there was a loud crash, that person may fail to understand what I'm saying because they couldn't hear me. Or, for instance, sometimes we're texting and our phones die. Obviously, we cannot communicate with someone if that medium of communication, the cell phone, is dead. So now I'll get into what I believe makes my communication model special. I think that sometimes communication can happen unconsciously or unintentionally, completely through feelings and almost like an aura between two parties. It's quite difficult to explain. I do believe that it exists because I have experienced it myself. No message here is purposefully sent. I think that sometimes people reach a mutual understanding, feelings of peace, maybe attraction between the two without any message being sent purposefully. So I hope you've enjoyed my model of communication. It's pretty basic, but I do believe that communication is a very basic tool that all people use, and that the communication model shouldn't be too confusing. I hope that you've learned a little bit about me and my personal view of the world through my model of communication. And next time that you feel that maybe you are experiencing communication with an entity but aren't purposefully sending any messages, think about me and think about my model of communication. Thank you so much for listening, and have an awesome day.